You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who take on my hate. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Naruto Enters Total Drama Island? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Pixel's Fanbook on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. We pick things up where we left with most of the campers staring down the 1,000-foot high cliff, either with fear or some with excitement. All of them were in their swimming suits. Chris was with them, standing next to a wooden crate with a chicken logo on it. Okay. Chris says, gaining all 24 campers' attention. Today's challenge is threefold. Your first task is to jump off this 1,000-foot high cliff, into the lake below. He says. Bridget looks down at the bottom of the cliff, to the lake, and sees there were two areas. One large white-lined area and a small red-lined area within the middle of the larger area. Piece of cake. Bridget confidently says as Chris smirks. She was in a surfer's bodysuit with a wave logo on the chest. If you look down, you will see two target areas. Chris says, making everyone else look down at the water. The wider area represents the part of the lake you don't want to land in since we stocked it full of psychotic, man-eating sharks. He says, widely grinning as everyone sees sharks circling in the area with one jumping out of the water and biting the air before going back into the water. Everyone flinches except Naruto, Dawn, and Bridget. Inside that area is the safe zone. That's your target area. Which, we're pretty sure is shark-free. Chris continues, not. Excuse me. Lashana says to Chris, in response to the last thing he said. She was in a dark gray one-piece swimsuit. For each member of your team that jumps, and actually survives, there will be crates waiting below on the beach. Chris says, gesturing to the beach at the bottom of the cliff where everyone could see a bunch of crates staked together. Each crate contains supplies that you'll need for the second part of the challenge. Building a hot tub. The team with the best one gets to have a wicked hot tub party tonight. The losers will be sending someone home. So, let's see, Killer Base. You're up first. He says. Oh, wow. Bridget utters, looking down to the lake again, this was a bit much. So, who wants to go first? She asks, turning to the others who were all silent a bit. Owen spoke. He was only in orange trunks. Hey, don't sweat it guys. I heard these shows always make the interns do the stunt first to see if it's survivable. Owen says. He was technically correct on that fact but was wrong on the other as Chris whistles, remembering the day he made his intern perform the test. Flashback, a week ago. Why am I up here, man? Chef asks. He and Chris were at the top of the cliff, with Chef in his pink swimming trunk with flowers on it. He also had on a floaty and a pair of pink googles. We need to test the stunt first. You know that, Chris says. Do I look like an intern? Chef asks, with his annoyance rising. No, but the ones we had to do the last test are all in the ICU. Chris says with shrugs before eyeing Chef. Come on you big chicken. He says, taunting Chef with chicken noises. Chef lets out a sigh of anger. I don't get paid enough for this man. Chef says. He slaps his googles over his eyes before leaping off the cliff, screaming for his life. Moments pass and he splashes into the water, only, not in the safe zone. Chef resurfaces and looks around himself to see if he had lost any of his limbs or was hurt, but he saw nothing. Hey! I made it. I made it, man. He says with relief to have lived through that. But he freezes as he felt something move beneath his feet. Hey! Something just brushed by my foot. Chef yells, looking around to see what was, but misses a fin circling the resurface around him before it submerges into the water. Chris! Something ain't right down here. Chris, he yells right before he is suddenly dragged into the water by something. Chef then jumps out of the water, screaming in terror before somehow running away on the water as a shark jumps out and tries to bite him. Back at the top of the cliff, Chris sees what happened and smirks. Well, that seems safe enough. Chris says, with a satisfied look as he checks this stunt off his list and walks away. End flashback. Yeah, we totally did. Haha. Chris laughs all while averting his gaze from everyone. So, who's up? Eva asks her teammates. Everyone on her team was silent, not wanting to be the first one. Everyone hears a sigh as one steps forward. Fine. I'll go first. Naruto says, stepping forward in his black trunk with orange flames on the hem of the trunk and a black wristband on his right arm. He starts to scratch a bit. Was I scared? No. Confessional Naruto. Naruto was sitting in the confessional back in his casual wear. If anything, I was DMN nervous. I mean, wouldn't you do if you had to jump off a freaking 1,000-foot high cliff? Also, I'm not afraid of sharks. Dudes, I live in LA, and have gone to the beach most of my life with family and friends. This wasn't my first run-in with a shark. Besides, you only have one life. So, you might as well live it to its fullest. He says as he looks at the camera and smirks. Naruto takes a deep breath and exhales as he looks at the edge of the cliff. He starts walking a little, then starts a little jog before breaking out into the full spirit toward the edge as he leaps off the cliff, performing a black flip. Whoa! Naruto yells as he plummets down to the water. Everyone scratches their heads to see how he did, only to see a splash. A moment later and Naruto resurfaces, hair matted, slightly covering his eyes as he shakes the water off as he had merged up in the safe area. Yeah, that was awesome. Wait, you waiting for? Get down here, guys. Unless you chicken. He yells, feeling an adrenaline rush. Yes, he made it. Jeff cheers. He and the rest of Killer Base were cheering Naruto as the blonde was getting picked up by Chef who drove a boat. Way to go, Naruto. Bridget yells to Naruto, who whistles back to her. Dawn smiles. I'll go next. Dawn says, she was in a pink short skirt like a swimsuit with pink trunks under the skirt. The mysterious nature girl steps forward while Chris marks Naruto down as a jumper. Dawn looks down to the water, looking at the areas, and sees Naruto on the boat, watching up. She takes a deep breath before, here I go. She yells as she jumps off the cliff. The Killer Base and some of the Gophers went forward to see how Dawn's dive was, only to raise an eyebrow, seeing something rather unusual. Is she falling slow? Courtney asks, seeing that Dawn was in fact falling a lot slower than a normal person should, as if she was a feather. When she eventually hit the water, with hardly even a splash, she, unfortunately, didn't land in the safe area but in the larger area, where the sharks were. She resurfaces and wipes the water from her eyes. Naruto notices a bunch of sharks approaching her at high speed, altering him. Dawn! The sharks! Naruto yells. Dawn looks at him before turning around and seeing the sharks coming towards her. Naruto was about to jump back into the water and swim to her, but before he jumps, he sees the sharks stop near her and rub their heads against her, making Dawn giggle and smile. I'm really sorry that I entered into your territory, but would you mind carrying me toward that boat? Dawn asks the sharks. This takes everyone off guard. Did this girl seriously ask man-eaters for a ride to the boat? That was no way they'd do it, but to their utter surprise, the shark actually comply with her request. The sharks dive down and go under Dawn before they carry her toward the boat. They arrive at the boat with Dawn hopping onto the boat, but not before she turns back to the sharks and pats their heads, much to the sharks' enjoyment as they smile at her as she looks at them. "Can I ask you to perform me a favor? My teammates are about to jump and could potentially land into your territory. Could you kindly let them safely swim in your territory should they land on it?" She asks. The sharks look at one another before turning back to her and nodding as she smiles. "Thank you. I promise to bring you both something for this," she says, and the sharks dive back into the water. Everyone back up on the cliff, even Chris, was stunned after seeing what just unfolded. Confessional Jeff. "Okay, I wasn't the only one who saw that, right?" Jeff asks. He was completely confused and shocked as he was trying to process what just happened. Did the food from earlier give me hallucinations from food poisoning, or did we all just see Dawn actually talk to sharks? Dawn turns around and sees Naruto's shocked expression. "Naruto? Are you okay?" Dawn asks, worried that something was wrong with him. Naruto blinks a bit before he lets out a huge grin. "That was so cool. You rode on man-eating sharks. Man, that was awesome to see." Naruto yells, ecstatic as Dawn just smiles at him with her usual smiles and giggles. "Hee hee hee. Thank you, Naruto, for saying that," Dawn says. The two then look up to the cliff, waiting to see who'd be next. "So, who do you think will jump now?" Naruto asks. After Bridget, it's Jeff, Eva, Duncan, Ezekiel, Harold, and Sadie. Dawn says, making Naruto look at her. "Are you sure?" Naruto asks with Dawn nodding. "Yes, I'm positive," Dawn says. "Then, who's not going to jump?" Naruto asks. They see Bridget had jumped off the cliff and was in a full dive pose toward the water. DJ. He is afraid of heights. This is due to an incident that happened to him when he was a child. Dawn explains. Naruto slowly nods, understanding people did have fears. "Oh, okay," Naruto says. He blinks after realizing something. "Wait, what about Courtney? You didn't name her as a jumper?" He asks, realizing she didn't name Courtney. "I'd rather not say what her reason is. I don't want to anger you by it," Dawn says. Did I miss something? The two turn and see Bridget by the side of the boat. "Nah. You didn't. Did you land in a safe zone?" Naruto asks, walking toward her with his hand out to Bridget. The surfer takes the offered hand. "Yep," Bridget says as she steps onto the boat with Naruto helping her up. The three look up at the cliff and see Jeff falling down into the water. He was in blue trunks. "Ho, ha ha ha," Jeff yells, waving his cowboy hat in the air. Eva was next to jump after him. She was in a blue bathing SHT. "Look out below," Eva yells. Duncan was next after her, but he didn't do anything while falling. He just crossed his arms and looked uninterested in this stunt. He was in black trunks. Next up to Duncan was DJ, but instead of jumping, he was looking down at the water. Looking scared as he backs away from the edge. He was in gray trunks. "Ah. No way, man. I'm not jumping," DJ says, waving his arms and shaking his head. "Scared of heights?" Chris asks, having a feeling about why DJ wouldn't jump. "Yeah," DJ says, looking at Chris. "Even since I was a little kid," he says. "That's okay, big guy," Chris says as he walks up to the giant and pats him on his back, as a way to comfort him, up until he grinned. "But, unfortunately, that makes you a chicken. So, you'll have to wear this for the rest of the day," he says as he places a RBB chicken hat on DJ's head. "Ah, man. For real?" DJ says. "Balk, balk, balk." Chris mocks DJ with chicken noise while doing a little chicken dance before stopping and pointing behind to a escalator that was there for some reason. That means the chicken path down is that away. Next. He says with DJ walking onto the escalator with shame. Chris pulls out a megaphone from somewhere and points it to the bottom. DJ didn't jump. He chickened out. Chris announces, Killer Base loses a crate. He didn't jump. Naruto says, blinking a bit before turning to Dawn. They were on the beach, guess you were right Dawn. He says as Dawn nods. That I was. Dawn says. Ezekiel was up next as he jumps off the cliff. He was in light brown trunks, and for some reason, he had on his boots and his hat. Yee-ho-woo. Ezekiel cheers as he falls to the water, but on the way down, he ends up hitting a rock on the side of the cliff, causing him to spin out of control for the remainder of his free fall down until he lands in the safe zone, with his team cheering for him as he resurfaces and gives a thumbs up. Yes. Harold cheers, seeing Ezekiel made it safe. Feeling confident that he'd do the same, he jumps off the cliff, while doing the splits. I suggest you turn away for this. Dawn says, turning her head away for some reason. Naruto turns to her and raises one of his eyebrows in confusion on why she wasn't looking at Harold before he looks back at his falling teammate and notices something. Wait, why does he have his legs open like that? Naruto asks, seeing Harold fall with his legs open in a split-like manner. If he doesn't close them in when he lands into the water, he'll. He was saying before Harold finally hits the water. Just in the worst way possible as he had landed on the water, crotch first. Everyone, even the sharks, watch and all wince as Harold lets out a pain-filled scream echo through the whole island as he holds onto his sore nuts. He lets out one more scream before eventually sinking down into the water. Land on his nuts. Naruto says after a while. He felt the phantom pains from that, and so did every other dude there and watching at home. Chris laughs a bit after watching that from the cliff. You hate to see that happen. He says. Excuse me Chris, I have a medical condition. Courtney says, making the host look at her. Courtney was in a brown two-piece swimsuit with her hair tied into a low ponytail. What condition? Chris asks, eyebrow raised. A condition that prevents me from jumping off cliffs. Courtney says. You can chicken out like DJ did if you want. Chris says, looking at his nails. But it might end up costing your team the win. And then they'll hate you. He says, grinning. It's a calculated risk. Courtney says, crossing her arms as she smirks confidently, I've seen the other team. And I don't think 9 of them will jump. She says. Chris shrugs. Okay, but you still have to wear this hat for the rest of the day. Chicken. Chris says, placing a RBB chicken hat on Courtney. He pulls out his megaphone again and aims it at the bottom. Courtney bailed out, so, that's 2 crates gone for the killer base. He yells, making the other base groan. Great, that'll make things harder for us later in the challenge. Naruto says, running his hand through his hair. Back at the top of the cliff, Chris drops the megaphone down and checks his list. Okay, so that makes 2 chickens. So we have 8 jumpers and 2 chickens. Chris says as he counts the number of jumpers. He then notices. Something wrong, wait, we're missing 2. He says as he looks up and sees the last 2 jumpers. They were Izzy and Sadie, but the former was tightly holding hands with Katie. The twins were in identical pink bathing suits while Izzy was in a green 2-piece bikini. She also had on a green swim cap for her red hair. I'm not jumping without Katie. Sadie says with Katie nodding. We have to be on the same team, Chris. We have to. Katie says before they approach the host. Please. Please. Can we? Can we? Can we? Can we? The 2 ask, annoying Chris. I can trade places with her. Izzy offers, holding her hand up. Alright, fine. Katie is on the killer base and Izzy's with the screaming Gophers. Are you happy? Chris relents with an irritated look on his face. Yay! The two twins cheer while Izzy just smiles and shrugs before walking to her new team. Good. Then mean you're up, girls. Chris says, pointing to the cliff's edge. We're coming, killer base. The two yell before jumping off the cliff at the same time effortlessly as they both land safely in the safe zone. Okay. Now that makes a total of 10 jumpers and 2 chickens. Chris says, finishing checking his list before turning to the Gophers, screaming, Gophers, if you can beat that. We'll throw in pull carts to put your crates on. He says. Nice. Okay, guys, who's up first? Trent asks, turning to his teammates to see who'd take the plunge first, but no one spoke. He was in dark sunburnt orange trunks. I'm sorry, but there's no way I'm jumping. Heather says firmly, crossing her arms. She was in a two-piece brown swimsuit. The top was strapless. And she had her hair in a ponytail. Why not? Beth asks, she was in a pink and rose dress-like bathing suit. Hello, we're on national TV. I'll get my hair wet. Heather says as if it was the obvious thing in the world. You're kidding, right? You say this now after you get soaked back at the docks by Tyler's wipeout earlier and again when we all fell into the water after the dock collapsed. Gwen says, not understanding Heather's logic here. She was in a black two-piece swimsuit. Shut it, weird goth girl. Heather hisses at Gwen, who simply rolls her eyes. If she's not jumping, then I'm not either. Lindsay says as she smirks at Heather with the Asian Canadian doing the same. OH, you're doing it. Lashana says, stepping right up to Heather. Says who? Heather asks, crossing her arms again as she glares at Lashana. Says me. Lashana says, glaring right back at Heather, I'm not losing this challenge, 'cause you got your hair dry, you spoiled little daddy's girl. She insults her. Back off, ghetto glamour, too tight pants wearing, rap star wannabe. Heather insults right back at the sister. Mall shopping, ponytail wearing, tall girl reading, peeking in high school prom queen. Lashana says, not letting the insults go to her head. Heather doesn't say anything at first before she lets out a big smirk. Well, at least I'm popular. She says. Making everyone wince, tensing up for the eventual cat fight or smirk, loving the scene play out. Confessional Dawn. I'm sensing a lot of negativity coming from the other team. Dawn says. She was in her swimsuit and she shivers, not liking what she was sensing. I hope that she's actually getting along with her team and wasn't the cause of it. She murmurs to herself, placing her head on her arms. You're jumping. Lashana aggressively yells at Heather. Make me. Heather yells right back as they were at each other's faces. Fine. Lashana shouts as she grabs Heather and lifts her above her head. Lashana walks to the edge of the cliff and easily tosses her off it. Ha! Heather screams as she falls all the way down to the water and hits the safe zone successfully. Heather emerges from the water, looking a bit stunned for a bit before looking up to the top of the cliff. Lashana. You are so dead. She shouts. Hey! I threw you into the safe zone, didn't I? Lashana yells down to Heather below as she gets ready to jump. Now, I just got hope I can hit it too. She whispers to herself before jumping off the cliff. She screams while falling all the way down to the water before also hitting the safe zone and surfaces next to. Yeah. She did it. Tyler cheers, I'm next. He says as he backs up a bit before going toward the edge of the cliff in a running start. He was about to jump when Chris stops him. Not so fast, kiddos, Chris says, holding his megaphone and looking down to the waters. Lashana's jump counts. But Heather's on the other hand doesn't. He yells, making the Gophers look at him in shock. What? But she made it into the safe zone. Gwen yells, Chris just smiles and looks at her. Yeah, but she was thrown off the cliff. She didn't jump off out of her own free will, so it doesn't count. You have to jump for it to count. Not getting pushed or tossed by others. That means, you're down a jumper and you won't get a crate that could have been yours. 1, Chris explains, making the Gophers in shock. Down the cliff in the water. Lashana and Heather had heard what Chris just said. Heather glared at Lashana, who looked embarrassed as she nervously laughs. Oh, whoops. Lashana says. Back up on top of the cliff, Chris lowers his megaphone and looks at the shell-shocked Gophers. Now you can go. He says. Tyler snaps out of his shock and looks down at the water again. He had to make this so his team could have a chance. He backs up again for some distance before taking off in a full run to the edge of the cliff and jumps off as he falls to the bottom. He reaches it, only to hit a buoy, letting out a loud audible cry of pain. Ow wow. Tyler lets out before he slides off the buoy and into the water, in the safe zone. Yikes, now that's gotta hurt. Chris says as Lindsay was beside him, having seen Tyler's wipeout and clearly scared by her expression. I thought this would be a talent show. Lindsay says with a frightened tone. She was in a red bikini, which did nothing to hide her large rack. Ha 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 ha, yeah. Chris laughs sarcastically. No. With a lot of hesitation, Lindsay bravely jumps off the cliff. She screams while waving her limbs in the air as she lands in the water. Gwen was next as she too screams for dear. Cody was next to jump as he was in yellow and green trunks. He too screams as he falls. Followed by him was Izzy, who for once didn't scream but instead was laughing hysterically with a crazy grin. After her, it was Justin who took the plunge. He dives off the cliff and into the water, only to land inside of the shark's territory. Everyone on the boat and on shore was yelling to him to get out of there quickly as the sharks were approaching him quickly. As soon as the sharks were near him, they were about to attack him, only to stop when he turns to them and gives them a bright smile with the water dripping from his body and hair. Hearts appear in the shark's eyes as one of them picked the handsome teen up, similar to Dawn earlier, and gave him a ride to shore where he hops onto and gives the shark a thumbs up as it dives back into the water. Everyone there was in shock at what happened. Dude's got looks. I'll give him that. Or maybe he can talk to animals as well. Naruto says, before looking down at his short teammate. Is he your long-lost relative or something? He asks with a joking grin, one that Dawn found funny as she giggles. No, he isn't. Dawn says. Back up on the cliff top. Beth was looking down to the bottom and was having second thoughts like how DJ did and, like him, she backed away. I can't do it. Beth says. Slumping down a bit as Chris just walks up to her and places the RBB chicken hat onto her head. She looks down at her team. I'm sorry. Cody and Izzy were mocking Beth a bit by dancing and balking like a chicken. Lindsay and Heather watched the glasses-wearing girl back out of her jump. That is like, so lame, right? Lindsay asks. Fully lame. Heather says, drying her hair while spotting a scowl. Back up on the cliff, as Beth took the chicken escalator down, there were only 3 Gophers left to jump. Trent steps forward to take his turn. Okay, bud, let's do this. Trent says, passing Owen and gives the large teen a high five before he runs to the edge and jumps off the cliff, diving into the water and landing in the safe zone. Soon after him, Noah jumped off, leaving Owen. Alright, there's one last camper here. Chris says to everyone down below with his megaphone. The Gophers need this to win this. He yells before turning back to Owen. No pressure, dude. He says. This causes Owen to relax a little, right before. Okay, there's pressure. He yells, making Owen nervous again. The Gophers were cheering for him to jump, even Heather, jump. Jump. Just do it, Owen. Do it. Knowing that to win, he had to jump. So, Owen straps on floaties on his arms and take in deep breaths as he stretches a bit. I was pretty darn nervous. Confession, Owen. The thing is I'm not that strong a swimmer. Owen says with a nervous expression, matching his tone. Confession, Jeff. I'm looking at this guy, and I'm thinking, there's no way he's going to make it. Jeff says, looking right at the camera. Confession, Gwen. I actually thought, if he jumps, he's going to die. Gwen says. She really didn't have much faith in her teammate. Confession, Naruto. He's going to jump. Naruto says, he was in his swim trunk while leaning onto the wall. I can tell, Owen's an underdog. And if you push an underdog into a corner, they'll do the impossible and win. I should know, I'm one too. We underdogs gotta stick together. He says. Take a good run, buddy. Chris encourages Owen, who backs up for a good distance. You got this. He says. I'm going to die now. Owen says, feeling as he turns around and faces the edge of the cliff. I'm going to freaking die now. He says. Everyone watches and waits in anticipation as Owen froze for a few seconds. Come on, big guy. Lashana whispers, hoping Owen would work up the courage to jump. Owen clenches his eyes before his eyes open, having burning determination in them as he takes off while letting out a battle cry before he finally leaps off the cliff. OODHCRP. Owen screams, plummeting toward the water. His team cheer for this, but they and the base quickly notice he was falling fast and gaining speed. Splash. His crash causes a massive splash in the water, with the water rising high enough to reach halfway for the cliff while making a large wave to form. The wave hits the shore with everyone on it while causing the boat chef was operating to capsize. When the water eventually dies down, we see the beach was soaked as the campers were on the sand, recovering from what just happened. Some heads were buried in the sand as well, with the boat and the sharks from the water were on the beach. Soon though, Owen emerges from under the water and starts fist pumping the air. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Who's the man? He cheers with a big grin. Whoa. Beth cheers. Yes. Lashana yell, in a victorious tone. The winners. Chris yells with his megaphone, the screaming Gophers. The Gophers cheer while the base just sigh in defeat. That was awesome, Owen. Trent cheers, he was hanging on the capsized boat. He notices Owen was frowning while looking around the area. Hey, what's wrong? He asks. I think I lost my trunks. Owen says, with everyone gagging and shivering in disgust. Lindsay was about to get up when a shadow stood over her. Hey, you okay? She looked up and sees Naruto standing next to her, with his hand out to her, and smiling. His hair was wet again thanks to Owen's splash. Due to the light, made him look like he was glinting. Why yeah, I am fine. Lindsay stutters, looking at him. Good, hate to see if you got hurt. Naruto introduces himself. I'm Naruto. He says. Lindsay just looks at him as she takes his hand and gets lifted to her feet. Lindsay. Lindsay says as Naruto's smile grows a bit. Nice to meet you, Lindsay. Naruto says, closing his eyes in the process. This resulted in him not seeing Lindsay beginning to blush. Nice to meet you. Lindsay just stutters out. Alright, campers. Fortunately, their attention gets drawn to Chris. Now's the time for you and your team to move your crates down the beach and back to your cabins for part 2 of this challenge. Change back into your clothes and start moving your crates. Well, that's for us to get moving. Naruto says. He lets go of Lindsay's hand. See you later, Lindsay. He says, smiling one last time before he walks away to his team. Lindsay watches him leave, still in her state. Why yeah, later. Lindsay says. She stands there a bit. Hey. Lindsay feels someone tap on her shoulder. Huh. Lindsay breaks out of her state and looks to her right, wondering who it was, and sees Gwen. "Are you feeling alright?" The goth girl asks. Lindsay looks at her a bit before realizing what she was doing as her blush reddens. "Why yeah. I'm fine." Lindsay yells as she runs away from Gwen, leaving the goth there, every confused. "Okay." Gwen just says, confused about what was up with Lindsay as she walks to the cabins to get changed. After the teams changed back to their dry casual wear, they returned to the beach and collected their crates. The screaming Gophers were having an easy time moving their crate thanks to the pull carts they won. The killer base was having a rather difficult time since they had to push their crates along the sand. The only ones who were having much difficulty pushing theirs were Duncan, DJ, Eva, and Naruto. The others, Courtney, Bridget, Harold, Ezekiel, Dawn, Jeff, Katie, and Sadie were in pairs pushing their crates across the sand. Courtney winces with Bridget looking at her as she points to her hand. "Ow. I think I got a splinter," Courtney says, looking over her hand. Eva then walks over to Courtney and Bridget and lifts their crate up effortlessly. "Shut up and move your crate," Eva aggressively says to the Hispanic Canadian before dropping the crate to the sand with a loud thud. "Chicken. Hey, I'm the only one here with CIT experience. You need me," Courtney says as she points to herself with her thumb, trying to defend herself. The others look at one another and chose not to respond. "Yeah, and look where that got us," Naruto says, rolling his eyes while pushing his two crates, stacked together. He pushes alongside Dawn and Jeff. "Need help?" he asks. Dawn looks at him and shakes her head. "No, we're fine. But thank you for asking, Naruto," Dawn says with a smile. "Nah, bro. We're good. You're already got 2 crates," Jeff says, smiling as well. Naruto nods and smiles. "Okay," Naruto says as he pushes a bit harder, away from. After about 15 minutes pass, Ezekiel stops pushing his crate with Harold as he cracks his back. "I gotta take a PSSI," Ezekiel says. "Hurry up, we're already behind," Eva says, setting her crate down and using the opportunity to take a breather. "Ooh, I have to go too," Katie says as she and her best friend stop pushing their crate. "You too?" Sadie asks with Katie responding with a nod. "Oh my god, me too," she yells. The best friends follow Ezekiel into the wood and go in different directions to do their business. While this was happening, a rather large bug flies toward Courtney's face which she notices, causing her quickly swat at it, with her swat ending up hitting her own eye. "Ow." Courtney lets out a cry of pain. "I think something bit me," she says, moving her hand away from her eye and seeing just what bit her. It was a fly. "No." Dawn yells as she rushes over to the CIT and takes the dead fly from her. She saw that she was too late. She lowers her head and gives the fly a prayer. "Rest in peace, dear fly friend," she says in mourning. Courtney just watches Dawn and gives her a weird look as Naruto walks over to them after having the cry and scream and came to investigate. He sees the dead fly in Dawn's hands and then looks at Courtney's right eye which was starting to turn pink. "That was a horse fly. And it bit you in your eye," Naruto says. "What?" Courtney yells. She starts to panic as she covers her eye with both of her hands. "What's going to happen to me?" "Whoa, just relax. As soon as we get to the camp, we'll take you to the medics and get it treated before it really swells up," Naruto says. Courtney nods and starts to take deep breaths in, calming herself. "Oh okay," Courtney says. Before anything else could be said or done, Ezekiel and the twins return, satisfied. "All better?" Eva asks them, tapping her foot on the sand. "Yep," Katie says, nodding with Sadie. Ezekiel also simply nods as he walks back to Harold. Good, 'cause we're still behind. Eva says before she picks up her crate and resumes walking. Katie and Sadie start pushing their crate again along the sand, but something was wrong as both gain uncomfortable expressions. Ew, something's itching me. Sadie says. She turns to her best friend. Are you itchy too? She asks with Katie nodding. Totally itchy. Like, really bad. Katie says. After about 5 minutes, their butts were slowly turning red. Oh, it's really itching now. Sadie says, her butt was feeling like it was on fire. Yeah, mine feels like it's burning. Katie says, feeling a similar irritation as Sadie. Okay, I need to scratch. Both girls stop pushing their crate as they both scratched their butts aggressively. As they were doing so, Chris arrives, driving an ATV. You guys are way behind the other team. Like, way behind. What's the problem? He asks. Their butts are itchy. He hears Courtney speak behind him. He turns around to see her, only to cringe at seeing her right eye was now swollen and was pink. Oh my boxers, that's bad. Chris yells, pointing to Courtney's eye, making her hide it with her hand. What happened? She was bitten by a black fly in her eye. She needs to go to the medic to go and get it treated. Naruto says. What he said makes Chris think. I don't know, dude. If she does, then you could make the Gophers have longer. Chris says, making Courtney look at him. And no need. I'm fine. Courtney yells. Courtney. Naruto was trying to say but stopped when he sees her giving him a look. I said I'm fine. Really? Courtney says to Naruto. He looks at her a bit before he just lowers his head. Fine. Naruto says. He knew that anything he said, Courtney wouldn't listen. Just then, Bridget and Dawn walk over to the twins as they scratched their butts. Did you guys squat down when you peed in the woods? The surfer asks as the twins look at her. Yeah. Katie says, raising her eyebrow while scratching. Did you happen to notice what kind of plants you were squatting over? Dawn asks, getting an idea of what happened, and Bridget was thinking the same. They were kind of oval-shaped and green and all over the place, Sadie says as she was scratching. Were they low to the ground? Bridget says, and were about this big, she asks, making a gesture with her hands. The twins nod with the two blondes looking at one another before turning to them again. You two squatted in some poison ivy. Dawn says. This makes Katie and Sadie stop their scratching and were silent for a bit before they frantically start screaming and panicking about the situation as Chris hears this. What? No way. That's awesome. Ha 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 ha. Chris laughs while the twins start rubbing their butts in the sand, in an attempt to soothe the itchy sensation. Location, Campgrounds, Camp Wawanakwa, Mataska, Ontario, Canada. With the Screaming Gophers. With the advantage of their pull carts, the Screaming Gophers had made it to the campsite in record time. Chris told them that the only way they had to open them was with their teeth, something that he proudly came up with. After a painful while, the team was finally able to open the crates. They look into the crates just to see what was in them. Hey, I got wood, strong paws. Owen says, taking out 2 plank pairs of woods. I got some tools here. Trent says, pulling out some tools before taking out a blue plastic sheet and what looks to be a pool liner. Lashana was looking in her crate as Heather and Lindsay were approaching her from behind. Hey. Heather greets, making Lashana turns around and sees them. Hey. Lashana greets back, rubbing her arm nervously. She sighs, listen, I just wanted to say for tossing you off the cliff like that. I wasn't thinking and I really wanted to win that. She says, feeling really bad for throwing her off the cliff, even more after learning to do that almost made them lose. Heather surprisingly just waves her hand. Oh, no worries. I was making things difficult for the team. So water under the bridge. Heather says, smiling at the sister, please, I wanted to apologize for what I said about you being a ghetto rap wannabe. I didn't mean it. I actually love your earrings. They're so pretty. For real. Lashana says, with a raised eyebrow. Yeah. Lashana says as she holds her hand to Lashana, truce. She asks. Lashana looks at the gesture and smiles. Straight up. Lashana says as they shook hands. Heather and Lindsay then walk away, and when they were just far enough from Lashana, Lindsay turns to Heather, did you really mean all that stuff you said to LaFonda back there? She asks. Lashana. Heather corrects her before rolling her eyes. And no, she's going down. And P.S., those are the ugliest earrings I've seen in my life. She says. Oh. Lindsay just says, but she gets confused. So, if you hate her, why were you being nice to her? She asks the Asian Canadian who was applying some lip beam. Have you ever seen these types of shows before? Heather says. Lindsay shakes her head. Keep your friends close, and your enemies closer. She says. Oh. Lindsay says, as she finally gets it, sort of. She then asks Heather something, am I your friend? She asks. Heather looks at her for a bit before shrugging. Yes, you are. Heather says as she starts to walk away, but not before saying one last thing, for now. Guys, I think I've found out what we didn't get. Noah says, gaining most of the Gophers' attention. What? What is it? Cody asks. I just did a check and I found that we're missing the water filter and the control panel. Noah says, looking at the items they had. Probably what we could have gotten if Heather's toss counted. Gwen says, as Lashana looked embarrassed. Again, sorry y'all. Lashana says. It's cool. Really. None of us knew Chris wouldn't count it. So, really harm done. Trent says, waving his hand. He turns to Noah, Noah, can we still build the hot tub without those things? He asks. Yeah, it can work, but it'll be a pain for us since we'll have to manually clean the tub and we really can't set the temperature right. The best we can do is to endure it. Noah says as Trent nods. Cool. Trent says. Finally. The team turned and sees the killer base finally arriving at the campsite while they were either dropping their crates or stopping pushing them. Well, most of them were there as Katie and Sadie were nowhere to be seen as Naruto was pushing their crate along with his. Hey, what's up guys? Trent greets the team, in his calm layback tone. Good man, really good. Naruto says, panting a bit as he was cracking his knuckles. Hey, aren't you missing a couple of girls? One white and one Hispanic. Lashana asks, noting the absence of Katie and Sadie. They're just getting a drink. Courtney says, after a bit of hesitation in making the excuse. Yeah, if they drink with their butts. Harold says, making the joke to Ezekiel, who laughs. The reason why he made the joke was that Katie and Sadie jumped into the ocean and take off their shorts and panties before putting their bare peaches into the water to cool down their irritation. They gained the poison ivy. It was working, but they had to stay there for a bit. Several of the Gophers notice Courtney's swollen eye and silently cringe at how it looked. Hey, what's up with your eye? Owen asks, pointing to Courtney's eye as she just covers it. Oh. It's nothing. Courtney says. She got bit by a horsefly. She needs to go get it treated soon. Dawn says. Shut up. Courtney whispers to the nature girl while getting near her, we don't want them to know that. Okay. Chill. Naruto says as he gets in between them, in case something was to happen. The base quickly pile their crates together as Jeff stands on top of them. Okay, dudes. It's not too late. Jeff says, he was trying to encourage his team and give them positive motivation. We can do this. He yells. But his novice speech didn't quite work as some of the team weren't paying attention as Harold was asleep, drooling while Ezekiel was picking his nose. Courtney, who was sitting next to him, notices this and cringes in disgust. Ew. Courtney says, making the farm homeschool turn to her, taking his finger out of his nose. What? Ezekiel says, wiping his finger on his pants. That's really gross. Bridget says, backing away from Ezekiel as she was disgusted. Okay, look guys. We have a hot tub to build and we need a project manager. Courtney says, gaining everyone's attention. She was focused on winning this challenge. Since I've actually been a CIT before. I'm electing myself. She says. And how does being a CIT have anything to do with building a hot tub? Naruto asks. He really didn't think being a CIT would help in a situation like this. Really, the skills you could get from being a CIT can have so many uses in a reality show like this. Oh, and do you have anything other ideas? Courtney asks. Naruto just looks at her and stands up. Actually yeah, I do. For starters, we need to see just what we have and what we don't since we don't have 2 crates. Once we see what we don't have, we have to think of alternative ways to compensate for the losses and try and make the best of it. Naruto says, as Courtney looked surprised, she wasn't expecting. Well, looks like we found our project manager. Duncan says. So, where do we begin, Whiskers? He asks. We open the crates, Naruto says. He looks at Bridget and Dawn. Bridget, Dawn. You two go and get our twins and come back together. We'll need all the help we can get. Confession, Naruto. Naruto sighs as he looks down and places his hand on his face. We were dead the moment we started. Naruto mummers as he runs his hand down his face. Teamwork and communication are things we're seriously lacking at the moment. We discovered that we didn't have any nails for the tub and we were missing the plumbing as well. We tried to make the best of things by using waterproof wood glue and a hose pipe, but it wasn't enough since we were either butting each other's heads, letting ourselves get distracted, or hardly paying attention to our surroundings. Don't get me wrong, there are some cool people on this team. Jeff and DJ are cool dudes. Eva's cool since she did do most of the heavy lifting. Duncan is, alright, a bit of a JRK, but who isn't? Bridget's cool too, but she seriously needs to be more aware of her surroundings since she knocked Harold out with a piece of 2x4. Dawn is, really nice. She's really nice. Courtney's a bit rough on the edges but cool. Harold's, a bit weird, and so is Ezekiel. But in all, we sucked today and it sucks that my team is the first to lose. Many hours later and the 2 teams were standing in front of their completed hot tubs. The Gophers' hot tub looked well done and ready to be partied in while the base tub, it was standing and holding well. Chris first inspects the Gophers' hot tub, he analyzes the tub critically, looking for any flaws to it, and even checking the water and its temperature. He looks at the tub one last time before looking at the Gophers. This is one awesome hot tub. Chris yells, nodding in approval as the Gophers cheer, even Owen who emerges from the tub. The host turns to the base tub and finds a seagull floating in it, with the killer base looking nervous, worried that their work into it wasn't enough. Chris looks at it and taps onto the shell of the tub. It shakes a bit as he backs away from it, waiting to see if it was going to break down and spill the water out, but after a while, the shaking stops and Chris sees that it was holding, barely but holding. Well, it's still surprisingly standing. I've got to give it to the screaming Gophers. Chris yells with the Gophers themselves celebrating their first victory, while the BAS just sigh or looked defeated. Gophers, you're safe from elimination. And, you get to rock this awesome hot tub for the rest of the summer. Bonus, he yells, pointing to the camera. The Gophers cheer more, while some even did victory dances. Chris turns to the losers. Base, hate to be you right now. I'll see your sorry asses at the bonfire tonight. We won. Lindsay yells with a big smile, we get to stay here for another 3 days. She cheers. Heather, her and Beth cheer in unison as. Who? Owen gains everyone's attention with all of them seeing that he wasn't wearing anything. Luckily, his shame was blurred out for the viewers, for the campers and the camera crew weren't so lucky. Ahahaha. Yes. We get to stay. We get to stay. We are so awesome. We won the contest. He sings and dances a bit before he wraps Heather and Lindsay into a hug with one arm, with Heather cringing in disgust from being close to his NDE body while Lindsay just smiles. Later that day, the campers were back in the mess hall, having their dinner, that is, if you even call it dinner. While the Gophers were happily smiling and chatting to one another, still basking in their victory at their table, things couldn't be said the same for the base table as they were trying to think of one thing. Who would be the first camper to leave Total Drama Island? So, what do we do now? Katie awkwardly asks. We have to figure out who we're going to vote off. Courtney states the obvious. Well, I think it should be Princess here. Duncan says, pointing to Courtney, who was taken back by this. Or the brick house here. Duncan continues, pointing his other hand to DJ, who was also taken back. What? Courtney utters in complete surprise. Why would Duncan go after her? Why? Because you two were the only ones who didn't jump. Which was part of the result as to why we lost. Naruto says, knowing the reason why Duncan chose them. The punk nods. Yeah, he's right. You two didn't jump. But, if we ever had to lift a truck. I like our odds with the big guy here. Duncan says, pointing back to DJ, who was smiling at Duncan's words. Courtney on the other hand was in disbelief. You guys need me. Courtney tells them, trying to defend herself in not getting voted off. I'm the only one here who's dash, she was saying, but she gets cut off. We know. Bridget says in an annoyed tone. Rolling her eyes. You used to be a real CITA, so who would you pick? She asks. Well, what about? Courtney was looking at anyone on the table that she could push everyone to vote for. Him. She yells, pointing to the one person they never thought she'd pick. What? Naruto utters with wide eyes, suspired that Courtney would suggest he be voted off. Someone hears this and was scared. No. Lindsay surprisingly shouts and stands up from her seat. Her shout causes everyone to stop eating/chatting and turn to her. Lindsay quickly notices this and had to think of something fast as an excuse. I mean, there's no salt on the table. There's no salt on the table, bummer. She says, sitting back down. Dawn stops eating and stands up. Pardon me if I may sound rude, Courtney. But Naruto jumped off the cliff, he was the first one to do it. And he's actually tried to help us move our crates down the beach, even when he didn't need to. Dawn says, defending Naruto as she looks at Courtney with a firm stare, so, tell me, why would we vote out someone as useful as Naruto? She asks, almost glaring at Courtney, who was actually glaring at Dawn. Naruto looks at Dawn and smiles sincerely, happy at the fact that she was defending him. Jeff soon intervenes. Okay guys, let's just all calm down. Jeff says as he places his hand on Courtney's shoulder and sets her down back to her seat. Naruto does the same for Dawn. We're all a little tense and stressed from the challenge. Let's not let our emotions just the best of us. He says, trying to defuse the tension in the room. Alright, I've had enough prison food for one day. Duncan says as he pushes his bowl of rice aside and gets up. I'm going to go take a nap. He says as he walks toward the exit. Same, I've got to blow off some steam. I'm out of here. Naruto says, standing up and following Duncan toward the exit. You can't do that. Courtney yells, the two ignore her and continue walking away. We haven't decided who's going yet. I still don't get why you didn't jump DJ, Ezekiel says, with his arms crossing as everyone looks at him, why are you stooping down to the girls' level? He asks. Everyone on the base table was silent, even some from the Gophers table, all stared at Ezekiel. Naruto and Duncan even stopped as they were right by the door. What? DJ says, making sure he had heard that right. Well, look around. There are only 3 people wearing chicken hats and you're the only guy who wearing one, the rest are girls. You're a guy, you're better than that. A/N, I am truly sorry for writing this, I am not a sexist and I feel ashamed and disgusted with myself for writing that. Katie and Sadie gasped as now everyone from both tables' attention was on Ezekiel, many glaring at him. What's that supposed to mean? Bridget aggressively asks as she and Eva approach Ezekiel with fierce glares. Yeah, homeschool. Eva says as she pounds her fist in front of Ezekiel, shaking the entire table. Enlighten us, she shouts. Well, guys are much stronger and better at sports than girls are. Ezekiel states, as if it was a fact, causing everyone nearby to back away from the scene as all the girls in the room were giving Ezekiel a look that could kill him. Even Dawn. Oh, dude. Jeff slaps his hand against his forehead while shaking his head. You did not just say that. My dad told me to look out for the girls here, Ezekiel told everyone as he crosses his arms and nods his head. And help them in case they can't keep up. He says. He misses the wide eyes of all the girls before they really gave him a look at promised death. Bridget grit her teeth as Eva grabs Ezekiel by his neck and easily lifted him up into the air. Still think we need your help keeping up? Eva asks in a threatening tone while lightly strangling the boy in her hands. Ezekiel could barely let out a slightly frightened tone. Not really. Okay, guys, let's give him a break. Jeff once again played the role of peacemaker to try and get the heat off Ezekiel as Eva harshly dropped him on the ground. I mean, at least he doesn't think that guys are smarter than girls. But they are. Ezekiel just had to speak up. Suddenly, Naruto runs toward the table, jumps over it, and kicks the homeschooled farmer by the side of his head, causing Ezekiel to drop to the floor. Everyone was caught by surprise and was shocked from seeing Naruto do this. The blonde stands over and looks down at him with a glare. Dude, let me tell you something. I'm friends with girls and I can say with confidence that they are one of the strongest people I know. One of these girls has a wicked right hook and you don't want to be the receiving end of one if she's pissed or moody. One's a MSTR black belt in karate and is DMN good at handling loads of different weapons. Some of these friends are the strongest when it comes to mental endurance. They have the best patience in my friend group back home. Hell, even my mom and grandmother are the strongest people too. My mom has a temper that rivals anyone, she can and has pulled car doors off when she wanted to. And my grandmother, she's got a wicked right hook as well, one that can break your jaw in 3 places if you pissed her off to that extent. Naruto says, looking down at Ezekiel. My advice to you dude, don't think that women aren't fragile or weak. They are just as strong as men, even stronger since they go through childbirth and have to deal with perverts every day. Next time you say SHT like that in front of me or any girl here, I will put you in a stretcher. He says as he turns around, and heads straight to the exit, moving past Duncan as he kicks the door open and walks away from the mess hall to go and cool down somewhere else on the island. Back at the mess hall, everyone just sat there, in silence after what just happened, not really knowing what to say or do. Wow. Gwen says, finally after trying to find herself, just, wow. She utters. Dawn looks back to the door with a concerned expression, worried about how Naruto was feeling. Later that night. Location, the dramatic bonfire ceremony. Night fell upon Camp Wawanakwa as all the members of the killer base were sitting on the stumps at the campfire site with Chris in front of the metal barrel. All the girls on the team were glaring at Ezekiel while Naruto still looked a bit upset, maybe from earlier. Duncan turns to the homeschooled boy. Dude, you've got a lot to learn about the real world. Duncan says, making Ezekiel flinches as he just rubs his cheek, where a band-aid was on. Killer base. Chris got everyone's attention as he spoke in a serious tone. In Chris's hand was a plate holding 11 marshmallows. Marshmallows represent a tasty treat that you enjoy roasting by the fire. But at this camp, marshmallows represent life. Jeff dramatically makes a hanging gesture before looking to Bridget and winking, the surfer girl nodding in response. You've all cast your votes and made your decision. Chris says while holding up his plate of marshmallows. There are only 11 marshmallows on this plate. When I call your name, come up and claim your marshmallow. The camper who does not receive a marshmallow tonight must immediately return to the dock of shame to catch the boat of losers. That means you're out of the contest and you can't come back, ever. Most of the killer base tense up as Chris said that. The first marshmallow goes to Jeff. Jeff lets out a big smile as he walks up to Chris, who pierced a marshmallow onto the party dude's stick. Naruto, Dawn, Harold. Chris calls out the next three, who all smile and walk up to Chris with sticks with the host attaching marshmallows to them. Yes. Harold cheers as Chris gave him his marshmallow. Naruto let out a sigh of relief and relaxed a bit as Chris put a marshmallow on his stick as Dawn put a reassuring hand on his back. He looks back at Dawn and returns a grateful smile to her for the support. Katie. Bridget. DJ, Sadie. Chris calls the next 4 campers up, who eagerly went to get their marshmallow. Oh, yay. Sadie and Katie said in unison as they hugged each other. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Duncan, Eva. The delinquent and Jock smirks as they head over to collect their marshmallows from Chris. And that left only 1 marshmallow. And 2 campers. Courtney and Ezekiel. Campers, this is the final marshmallow of the evening. Chris says. Both Courtney and Ezekiel incredibly tensed up. Courtney's heart was racing as the homeschooled boy starts to violently tremble and shake. Chris rises his hand up, causing both of the remaining campers to drop their sticks as both of their eyes focus on who the host would point at. And after what felt like an hour of complete heart attack causing tension, Chris calls out the next and final camper that would be staying tonight. Courtney. Courtney quickly smiles and grabs her stick and went to go bet her marshmallow as Ezekiel just sighs and slumps down. Can't say I'm shocked. You did manage to PSS off all the chicks on the island, after I said don't do anything that'll PSS anyone off. Plus, I saw you picking your nose earlier, dude. Not cool. Ezekiel just got up while slumping down as all the girls gave Ezekiel a smug look. His reason for being eliminated was obvious. Dock of shame is that way, bro. Everyone watches as Chris led Ezekiel to the dock of shame. The homeschooled boy stepped onto the boat Chef used during the diving challenge earlier that day and drove Ezekiel away from Total Drama Island. Forever. The rest of you, enjoy your marshmallows. Chris told the remaining members of the killer base as they started to roast their marshmallows over the fire. You're all safe, for tonight. Confessional, Gwen. Yep, this camp pretty much still stinks. Gwen sighs out before looking at the camera. But now that I'm here, I guess I might as well actually try to win. To the screaming Gophers. Cody toasts as he and the rest of his team were enjoying a nighttime hot tub party. To the screaming Gophers. The rest of the Gophers cheered. Go Gophers. Go Gophers. Lashana chanted as she started dancing around in victory. Owen and Noah soon joined Lashana in dancing around and chanting, Go Gophers. Go Gophers. Go Gophers. Go Gophers. Go, go, go Gophers. Meanwhile, the killer base was seen walking back to their camps slumped down in defeat. But as Courtney comes into view, she looks at the camera with a fierce look. Are you recording this? Courtney asked as the cameraman nods and zoomed in on her. Good. They can enjoy their little part all they want, but I am gonna win this competition and no one is gonna stop me. Later, on top of the base cabin. As all the other campers were in their cabins, fast asleep, one camper was still awake. In a black t-shirt with a pair of green boxer shorts, Naruto was laying on the metal roof of the cabin, looking at the star-filled night sky. He had his guitar next to him along with his amp as he intentionally was going to jam out a bit but chose not to out of respect for his teammates. He sighs and just looks at the stars, wondering if being there was a good idea. Was it really a good idea for me to come here after everything back home? Naruto thought, I'm not here for the money or fame. I came here to get away from things at home and them, but did I really overreact and did it on impulse? He thought. He just sighs again and looks at the sky one more, thinking about his past and remembering someone. I really wish you were here, Chan. You could tell me what I should do, that is, if you still remember me. Naruto thought as he gazes at the stars. Not once noticing someone was doing the same, but on a tree and saw him. Naruto. Dawn thought as she just watches him. 3 days have passed since the last challenge and first elimination ceremony and it was early in the morning here on Total Drama Island. Most of the campers were all sound asleep in their cabins, enjoying whatever they were dreaming about while Eva was up and about, doing her morning training. Naruto was in his bed, sleeping and snoring a bit as he starts to smile, due to what he was currently dreaming. Just as he was sleeping and the others, Chris was walking by their cabins, holding a megaphone in one hand and something else in the other. He stops right in the middle of the two cabins and smirks at the cameras. This is going to be good. Chris says before he holds out the megaphone and turns it on, but instead of using the siren on it or even speaking to it, he holds the other thing he was carrying in his other hand, which was a blow horn. He hits the horn onto the megaphone, amplifying the sound through the camp, alerting and causing the campers to wake up with a jolt, causing some to unfortunately hit the top of the bunk bed under them or in Dawn's case, fall off her bed and hit the floor. Are you kidding me? It's like 5 in the morning. Lashana yells, rubbing the top of her head, she was one of the ones who hit their head. She hops out of her bed and marches to the window, opens it and peeks through it, and sees Chris. Do I look like a farmer to you? She yells at Chris who just smiles. All campers, report to the main square of the camp in 15 minutes for a brief. So, move it. Chris says through the megaphone, casually ignoring Lashana's question before walking away as all the campers grunt from the rude awaking and hop off their beds and got ready. Wait. Shouldn't we shower first? Harold asks with Naruto putting on his t-shirt and shaking his head. I don't think that's an option we have, buddy. Naruto says, resuming dressing up as the others follow suit. Soon, the guys for the killer base exit their cabin and meet up with their female teammates at the main square in between the cabins and wait for Chris. Soon, the screaming Gophers arrive, as tired and sleepy as the rest were as they wait for the host of the show to arrive. Cody stands next to Eva who was listening to some music with her earphones attached to her MP3 player. Looking down and spotting the device on her, Cody gets curious and tries to touch it when Eva notices this and snaps at him, by trying to bite his hand which causes Cody to react and retract his hand from her while she growls at him. Chris eventually arrives. Morning campers. Hope you slept well. Chris says, grinning at the campers as some just yawn or were trying to stand as most had bags under their eyes. Hi Chris, you look really buff in those shorts. Heather compliments Chris after seeing his change of clothing which were just a pair of khaki shorts and sandals. I know. Chris says, pointing at her as he already knows that, he looks at his watch. Okay, I hope you all are ready for your next challenge because it begins in exactly 1 minute. He says, causing Owen to look at him. Whoa, excuse me Chris, but I don't know if that's enough time to eat breakfast, Owen says, thinking about food as his stomach rumbles from this. Chris however just smirks. Ooh, you'll get breakfast Owen. Chris says, looking at the large boy who smiles and parts his belly at the notion that there would be food, but right after you complete your 20-kilometer run around the island. He yells proudly as the campers look at him with wide eyes. What? The campers yell while Chris just smirks, something that angers Eva. Oh, so you're funny now, huh? Eva asks, narrowing her eyes at the host. Well, let's see how you look when I get funny. She says as she stomps her way toward the host, but even before she could get remotely close to him, a few of the guys, mainly Jeff, Duncan, and Naruto, grabs her by her arms and hold her back. Eva, chill, chill. This isn't something to get worked up. Just chill. Naruto says, trying to calm down Eva before she do something that could potentially get her ejected from the show. It seemed that his words reached the fitness fanatic as she takes in a long deep breath and exhales for a long time. She looks at him and nods. Fine. Eva hisses as she removes herself from the boys and gives the host a glare. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She asks and Chris just smiles. A little. Chris says jokingly before looking at his watch and seeing the time. You've got 30 seconds left. He says as Eva just growls before moving back to her previous spot. Excuse me Chris, but how much is 20 kilometers in miles? Naruto asks. Chris blinks at him for a bit before he realizes something with Naruto. Oh right, the states use the imperial system, forgot about that. Chris says as he realizes that Naruto was used to the imperial system, not the metric system. He looks at the red highlighted blonde. It's a little over 12 miles Naruto. He says as Naruto understood the distance. Oh, okay. No biggie. Naruto says, shrugging his shoulders as if it was nothing, which catches some of the campers by surprise over how nonchalant he was about this. Once, the campers were at the base of the campsite that led into the woods. Chris had a starter's pistol in hand as the teens lined up for the start as some were in runners' starting positions. Okay, runners. On your marks, get set. Go. Chris yells before firing the pistol, and the majority of the campers took off running while some didn't and just took off jogging or simply were walking. Chris chuckles to himself before walking back to the camp to get the next part ready. Time skip, a little while later. After about 1.5 hours passed, the campers were still circling the island, going down the shoreline. Most of the campers were still running while the others decided to jog or walk. Do you know how much longer do we have to go? Harold asks, short-winded due to his psychic, as he walks beside Gwen, who chose to walk instead of running. Don't walk next to me. Gwen says as she speeds up her pace, leaving Harold to fall on his face from exhaustion. Heather chose to walk as well as someone was catching up to her. On your left. Noah says, bumping her as he runs past, which almost makes Heather trip. Do you mind? Heather asks, glaring at his retreating back. Confessional Heather. I don't run. Heather says, sitting in the confession booth. And I definitely don't run in high heel wedges. Do you know what would happen to my feet if I did? She asks. End confessional. Heather continues walking and walks over to a small ravine and sees something that disgusted her. She sees Owen bending down to the water as he takes sips from it while panting and sweating heavily. Can't. Owen sips on the water, catch. He takes another sip. Breath. Sip. Must be, condition. He utters before collapsing into the water as Heather scoffs. Yeah, and it's called overeating. Look into it. Heather says to her oaf of a teammate as Lashana walks past them, looking a bit exhausted. The homegirl leans against a tree and looks back at Heather after hearing what she said to Owen. Oh, and what's your excuse? Lashana pants. You skinny, annoying, oh baby, I'm too tired to ever insult you. She says as she couldn't even continue her burn. Chris shows up, riding a moped, and had his megaphone. Pick it up, people. If you're not back by lunchtime, you don't eat. Chris says as he passes them all and rides away, which leaves most of the campers annoyed due to how hungry they were. Oh, I hate him so much. Heather growls. As she steps over Owen's body and walks away, leaving the big team behind. A little up ahead, Naruto was jogging, and seemed that he wasn't out of breath as some of the others were. He was focused on his pace that he didn't notice someone moving next to him. It seems that you're having a good time. He blinks upon hearing the person speak and looks around to see who it was and sees Dawn jogging next to him. Oh, hi Dawn. Naruto greets the petite girl who nods at him. Sorry, didn't hear what you said. What was it? He asks. I said that you look to be enjoying this challenge. Dawn says, and Naruto flashes a grin as he nods. Sure am. This is nothing to me. Naruto says. Do you exercise often? Dawn asks and Naruto nods. Yeah. My mom's a fitness trainer and a dojo instructor, so she works out a lot. She kind of forced me into it when I was a kid, and since that, I started to love working out. Naruto says. He looks at Dawn and notices something with her. And you? You seem like you're not tired at all. He asks, seeing that she wasn't tired but looked a bit winded. Yes, I too work out a bit. I often do rock climbing as a hobby. Dawn says, and this piques Naruto's interest. You rock climb? Naruto asks and Dawn nods. Oh, I do. I go on one every once in a while. It's so relaxing really. Dawn says, looking at Peace as she reminiscences about her times in rock climbing. That's really awesome. You've got to tell me some of your rock climbing stories sometime. Naruto says as Dawn looks at him and smirks a little. Perhaps, only if you share some of your stories. Dawn says and Naruto mirrors her smirk. Deal. Naruto says and the two continue jogging. Time skip, later. A few more hours later and over at the main lodge, there were campers there, most of the screaming Gophers and the killer base, waiting outside the building for their remaining teammates to arrive as Chris was with them, filing his nails. They hear loud footsteps rushing over toward them and they look to see Owen running at full speed, holding Noah over his shoulders as the Hispanic teen looked like he was unconscious for some reason. Clear the way. We're losing him. Owen yells, everyone moves out of the way as he puts Noah onto the floor and starts performing CRP on him. Not long after he starts doing it, Lashana arrives, completely out of breath. Oh, we made it, finally. Lashana says as she falls down to her knees and tries to catch her breath. Not soon after, Harold comes clawing to the lodge, sweating and panting. What took you so long? It's been 3 hours since we got here. Courtney says as she walks up to the ginger-haired nerd who only looks up at her. I think I'm about to have a heart attack. Harold utters before his arms finally give out and he collapses onto his face onto the ground. Owen continues to perform CHST compressions on Noah and was about to do the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation when Noah miraculously recovered just before their mouths touched. Okay. Enough. You don't have to do that. Noah yells, shoving Owen away from him since he didn't want that mouth going anywhere near his. He's okay. He's gonna live. Owen yells as he picks up Noah and gives him a big bear hug, which causes Noah's back to crack and cut off his air supply. Gwen looks at the teams and realizes something. Wait a minute, Harold was the last one here, and Owen and Noah got here since they were the last ones out of our team. That means, we win. Gwen says, smiling as everyone else starts realizing this and the screaming Gophers cheer in victory while the killer base groan at the loss as Courtney looks at Harold. Oh, nice one Harold. You just cost us the challenge. Courtney yells at Harold who only lets out a sound in response. Chris quickly stops his nail filing and steps forward. Whoa. Hold your horses there guys. Who said that this was the challenge? Chris asks. This causes the Gophers to stop cheering and look at him, and so did the base in confusing. Say what now? Gwen utters, confusion on her face. Yeah, I never, that was the challenge. I just made you do that for something else. Chris says. For what? Heather asks, raising her eyebrow, but Chris just smirks. Oh, you'll see, ha ha ha. Chris laughs, which sent chills down some of the campers' spines, feel something bad was coming. Take a 15-minute breather and report to the doc for further instructions. I'll see you there. He says as he starts to leave, but he stops and turns back to the teens. Oh, and bring your swimsuits. You're gonna need them, he says, and leaves the campers to their thoughts about what was there at the docks waiting for them to need their swimsuits. Wonder what he has at the docks for us. Bridget says. Whatever is it, can't be bad. Right? Jeff says, shrugging his shoulders, thinking that it wouldn't be too bad. Time skip, 15 minutes later. At the docks. You were saying, dude. Duncan says, looking at Jeff with a glare as the party boy looked sheepish. The reason why? The two teams were all standing on top of wooden log posts inserted into the lake and were about 10 feet above the water's surface. And there were two things making it strong for them to stand. The first thing was that they were standing on the log with one leg, and the second thing was that they were carrying a long stick over their shoulders, and at each end of the stick were two identical buckets. Chris was on the dock, sitting on a folding chair, and had his megaphone with him as he lifts it up to his mouth. All right, campers, below you is the water of Lake Wawanaka, known for its calm waters and various life that live in it. And here, you're gonna try and not fall in it while holding the sticks over your shoulder with buckets which are filled to the brim with heavy rocks. We had the interns look around the island. Your goal is to stay on your log the longest. Chris says. Easy. Tyler says, smirking at this, but Chris smirks as well. Oh, and I almost forgot, if you do fall into the water, you'll be in for an electric surprise in the form of electric eels. Chris yells, grinning ear to ear as the campers. What? The campers yell in shock as they look down to the waters, and lo and behold, there were dozens of eels swimming around the logs, some jumping out of the water and snapping their teeth at them before landing back into the water. Confessional, Gwen. Okay, I need to know. How the hell do you even get a load of electric eels? Gwen asks, wondering where you find that many eels. Confessional, Chris. I know a guy. Ha ha ha. Chris laughs, as he was filling his nails again. Confessional, Dawn. Please, Mother Nature, please let those who aggravated those poor eels pay for their crimes in harming them. Dawn yells, while in a prayer motion as she was fuming. End confessions. The team that has the most members still standing on their posts within the time limit of 20 minutes will get something special in the end. Chris says, he then pulls out a timer. You begin, now. He says as he clicks the timer and watches on. A few minutes rolled by and the campers were still standing strong, but some were struggling to keep still as Harold looked like he was about to pass out. I can't hold on. Harold says, as he starts to shake while trying to hold on to his stick. Harold, don't you dare fall. Courtney says. Sorry, guys. Harold utters right before he falls off his log and splashes into the water. A few seconds pass before he jumps out of the water, screaming as there were eels wrapped around his body, shocking him with high volts before he somehow runs on the water, getting the eels off of him in the process, and gets to shore where he lays on the sand, and twitches involuntary. Oh, that's gotta sting. Looks like the base is down a player. Chris says, right before Lindsay falls off her post and lands into the water and gets shocked herself, causing her to scream. And so are the Gophers. He says, laughing while Chef went to get her out of the water. More minutes go by and more of the campers fell off their posts and were shocked and eliminated. From the killer base, it was Harold, Bridget, Jeff, Katie and Sadie, and Courtney. The ones remaining from that team were Naruto, DJ, Duncan, Dawn, and Eva. From the screen Gophers who were out, it was Lindsay, Noah, Justin, Cody, Lashana, Beth, Gwen, and Heather. The ones remaining for their team were Tyler, Trent, Izzy, who for some reason was doing a handstand and holding her stick with her feet while laughing madly, and Owen. All. Come on. Just fall alright. We've still got things to do. Chris yells from his megaphone as he was clearly bored with this. Naruto turns to his teammates and saw how they were doing. How are you doing there, brothers? Naruto asks. I'm alright, man. DJ says, smiling. I'm good. This is barely anything for me. Eva says, as calm as she could be as she had an expression of sheer focus. Duncan turns to the red-highlighted blonde and cracks a grin. Yeah, doing good, Whiskers, this is nothing. Reminds me a bit of Juvie, really. Having those yard moments and lifting some weights. You? Duncan asks as Naruto just playful scoffs. This is nothing really. My mom had me do crazier stuff as punishment. Naruto says, and this catches Eva's attention. Really? Eva asks, looking at him with a raised eyebrow. Like what? She asks as Naruto looks up. Oh, when I turned 10, my mom had me hang off the edge of a cliff while having a boulder tied to my ankles. Oh, and she had me recite the lyrics from Dream On by Aerosmith word for word. And that was to get my rights back to my favorite food after I got grounded for something I did. Naruto says, reminiscing that time as the others look at him weirdly or in shock at hearing that, A/N, anime moms do the craziest things, either themselves or to their child, and I can see Kushina doing the same to Naruto. Don't believe me? Look at her in the Naruto movie, Road to Ninja, when she was calling him from his room. Okay, even I can't do that. Eva says, after getting over her shock, is your mom alright? She asks as Naruto just laughs. Yeah, she's fine. A bit nuts, but I love her. Naruto says, he looks over at Dawn and sees that she was shaking slightly while holding her stick. Hey Dawn, are you doing alright? He asks. Dawn just looks at him and nods. Why yes. Dawn says, smiling, but her voice and smile sounded/looked strained, and Naruto saw it. Dawn, are you sure? Naruto asks with a gentle yet stern tone and expression. Dawn looks at him and knew she couldn't lie to him, and she lets out an exhausted sigh. No, I feel like my arms are about to give out. Dawn says, and it was evident by how her arms were shaking. Naruto was concerned for her, but he looks over at the other team and notices that one of them was starting to fade. He looks back at Dawn and smiles. You can drop out now. Naruto says, and Dawn looks at him with a wide-eyed expression. What? No, I can't. Not when there could be a reward on the line. Dawn says, but Naruto just shakes his head. No, you can. Look at the other team. Naruto says. Dawn and the rest of the team look over at the Gophers and saw that there were only 4 left. There's only 4 of them left while there's 5 of us left, and if my counting's correct, there's only 30 seconds left. We've won this, you can drop out of this, you've done enough, you can leave the rest up to us. He says. Dawn looks at him with a. Are you sure? Dawn asks and Naruto just nods. Positive. You can let go, trust me. Naruto says as Dawn thinks about it and decides on her choice. She looks at him and nods. Oh okay, I'll drop out now. Dawn says as she leans forward and falls over her post and into the water, but there was no shock as most of the eels head toward her and raise her from the water's surface. Dawn's out. But no shock, dang it. Chris says, but sounded disappointed as he didn't hear Dawn get electrocuted as she was being carried by the eels back to shore. And as this happens, another camper falls off their post and into the water right as they scream from the electric shock from the remaining eels, and this had him smiling. And there goes Owen, and he's shocked. Ha ha ha. He laughs. Chris then hears the timer go off, signaling that the challenge was over as he sees the REA. Well, with 4-3, the winners of this part are the killer base. He yells, declaring the winners. Yes. The members of the base cheer while the Gophers just groan at the loss, knowing that they lost the challenge. But. Alright campers, dry up, rest a bit, and report to the main lodge for the next part. Chris says as he stands up and heads off the docks, but the campers look at him with the same confusion as previously. What? But, I thought that was the challenge. Harold says, still laying on the sand right before he gets shocked by leftover electricity within him. No, it wasn't. I'll explain things, after you change back into your clothes and report to the main lodge. That is all. Chris says as he laughs and walks away, leaving the campers to wonder what was really going on with him. What is that guy planning now? Duncan asks. I don't know, but he has to say what's going on or else we'll beat it out of him. I'm getting sick of this. Eva says as she cracks her knuckles into her palm. The campers got themselves off the sand and off the boat and make their way to their cabins to get dry and changed back into their regular attire. Time skip, 15 minutes later. At the main lodge. The campers arrive at the main lodge and see Chris standing at the fat south wing of the building, standing in front of a large curtain that blocked the window of the building that viewed the lake. Alright Chris, what's really going on? You said that you were going to explain what's really going on, so start explaining. Naruto says, crossing his arms as he was getting fed up with this game Chris was playing and frankly, everyone else was. All will be answered shortly my young Padawans, but first. Chris says in a sage-like manner before he grabs the curtain. Who's hungry? He yells, pulling along the curtain, revealing a large buffet table with various dishes and food on it, and this made most of the campers' eyes sparkle and caused drool to come from their mouths. Confessional, Gwen. After a whole 3 days for Chef's brown sludge, I almost cried when I saw that buffet. Gwen admits, having nearly forgotten what real food even looked like. Confessional, Owen. And then I saw it, the buffet table. It was appealing. Owen says with a voice that showed that he was probably the happiest person in the camp. There was turkey and Nanaimo bars and baked beans and the maple syrup. Ha, can I have a minute please? He says as he then starts to cry dramatically. Confessional, Naruto. Yeah, something's fishy here man, I can feel it. Naruto was in the booth, rubbing his chin with a contemplating look on his face, which made him look like a fox that was thinking. While everyone else was busy stuffing their faces with the turkey buffet, apart from Dawn and Bridget since Dawn's a vegan and Bridget's a vegetarian, they only had the veggies and fruits that were there. I on the other hand, only ate the noodles and spaghetti that the buffet had. Something about this just doesn't feel right, I couldn't be wrong but my gut's telling me otherwise. He says, continuing to think about this. End confessions. Woof. Before anyone really knew it, the entire buffet was completely eaten, nearly everyone was groaning and holding their sore stomachs while looking bloated. The only ones who were groaning from the pain or were on their knees were Bridget, Dawn, and Naruto with the 3 blondes sitting at a table together. So, is this a part of whatever Chris is planning? Bridget asks. Maybe. Naruto says, placing his last bowl of noodles on a stack of bowls that were on the table next to him. It is. Dawn says as the two turns to her. His aura is like an open book. He wanted us to be all this for his challenge. And if it isn't? It won't work, since I'm a vegan and I won't dream of eating anything related or from an animal. She says. Oh right. I forgot that you can read other people's auras. Bridget says, remembering the petite girl's strange ability. Chris jumps onto the now empty buffet table with his megaphone. Okay, campers. It's time for part 2 of your challenge. Chris yells, causing most of the campers to look at him while Dawn had a small smirk, having to call it. What? Wasn't that standing on those logs part 2 of the challenge while eating was part 3? Owen asks, face messy from the food he ate. Nope, all that was just part 1. Including the 20 kilometers run. Chris says. What more do you want from us? Gwen moans, not wanting to do anything more physical challenges. Weird goth girl is right. Heather says, you made us run until we lost our legs, then you made us hold 2 rock-filled buckets with a stick over our shoulders while standing on one leg over the lake. Haven't we been through enough today? She asks, and Chris looked like he thought about it. Let me think about that, no. Chris yells through the megaphone, causing the campers to wince from the volume. It's time for the Awake-a-thon. He yells, with a massive smirk. The whatif. Owen asks, having finished his can of baked beans mixed with maple syrup as he tosses the can to the pile behind him. Don't worry. This is an easy one. Chris says, jumping off the table, all you have to do is stay awake as long as you can. The team with the last camper standing on their team wins invincibility. He yells. So, what you're saying is the 20K run, the torture in holding rock-filled buckets, and the turkey fest was all a part of your evil plan to make it harder for us to stay awake? Gwen asks, having finally connected the dots of what was the actual challenge. That's right, Gwen. Chris yells, happily admits. Man, he's good. Gwen had to say, the host was certainly good at planning things out. And the others could agree on that. Alright, campers. To the campfire pit. Chris instructs everyone as he starts leaving the main lodge, move, move, move. So, Trent says as he walks up to Gwen while holding his stomach. How long do you think it'll take before everyone's out cold? He asks. Before Gwen could say anything, someone beats her to the punch. Either between 12 hours to 4 whole days. Dawn casually says as she, Naruto, and Bridget pass the 2 Gophers, them looking at weirdly. And at that moment, Owen passes by the 2, groaning loudly with some of his drool escaping from his mouth as he wasn't looking too fresh. Yeah, no way anyone's lasting that long. Gwen says with a shake of her head as she and Trent start leaving the lodge. Along the way to the campfire pit, Courtney remembers something Chris mentioned earlier. Wait, Chris. The reward we won at that standing challenge. What is it? Courtney asks. Chris stops and realizes that he forgot to give them the reward. Oh yeah. The reward. Chris says. He goes into his pocket and digs through it before he grabs whatever was in it out of his pocket. Here you go. He yells as he tosses the item at the base with Duncan catching it, and they look at what was it and see. A can of Azul Toro. Courtney says, seeing one of the most powerful energy drinks in the world was their reward. This had to be a joke. That's the reward? She asks and Chris nod. Yup. The drink that's made from real bull sweat. It'll put a pep in your step and hair on your chst. That's your edge over the other team. All you guys have to do is choose one of you who you'll think could be the one who'll stay awake the longest and have them drink it. Oh, and once you do choose, no switches are allowed and they can't share the drink with anyone else. Once they've opened the can, they have to drink it all in one go and show that there's nothing in the can left. Chris says. So, who'll be the one who takes it? He asks as he looks at the base. The base looked at one another before they huddled up. Okay, I need to know. Who here has stayed awake the longest in the past? And school-related is included. Courtney says, wanting to know who should have the boost. I stayed awake for a day and a half as a dare. Katie says as Sadie nods, remembering that dare. Oh, me too. Sadie says. I lasted 12 hours at Magic Steve's Camp of Magic. Harold says. While that was impressive, it wasn't enough. DJ shook his head. Never had to stay up late. Mama wanted me to get to bed at 9 p.m. every day. DJ says. Bridget and Eva had similar reasons. Same. Had to wake up early so I could catch the early waves in the morning. Bridget says. Same, had to sleep early so I could go on my morning runs. Eva says. I've stayed before multiple times for stargazing but not for long periods of time. Dawn says. I stayed up for 2 days. Had this wicked party I went to, it was awesome. Jeff says. I stayed for a few days when I had my first week in juvie. I can do this, Duncan says as Courtney nods, impressed by this. Alright, Courtney says as she turns to one last person who hasn't said anything. Naruto. What about you, how long have you stayed up for? She asks. Naruto closes his eyes as he ponders on the last time he stayed up and how long. I stayed up for about a week. Naruto says. The others look at him with wide eyes at hearing that. Had to do it since me and my band had to practice for our gig. He says as they just nod, semi-understanding the reason why now. Okay. You'll take the energy drink. Does everyone agree? Courtney asks and the others nod, agreeing. Good. She says as she turns to Chris. Chris. Naruto will have the Azul Toro. She says. Alright. Chris says as he turns to Naruto. Remember, dude, once you open that can, you call me and I'll see if you finished it all. No leftovers. Got it? Chris explains as Naruto nods with a serious expression. Yeah, got it. Naruto says as he takes the energy drink from Courtney and puts it in his hoodie's pocket for safekeeping. Good. Now, let's move over to the campfire pit to start the challenge. Chris says as he resumes leading the teams to the fire pit for the challenge to officially start. At the campfire pit, 12 hours later. The day rolls up and at the campfire pit, all 23 campers were hanging around and they all were exhausted with bags under their eyes, due to all the psychical torture they had to endure earlier that day. Despite having not eaten that much at the feast, Naruto did look quite exhausted but not as the rest, with some looking a lot worse, as he lets out a long and loud yawn. He looks to his left and sees Dawn sitting on the floor with her legs crossed as she was in a lotus meditation position as she had her eyes open. We are now 12 hours in. Chris says in a soft tone as the camera crew gave a view of the campers struggling to stay awake while a timer was on display above them, showing the 12-hour mark. With all 23 campers still wide awake. He says, with a hint of impressed in his tone. Owen suddenly stands up from his log seat and starts moving around. Woohoo! Staying awake for 12 hours. I can do that in my sleep. Woohoo! Owen cheers with his usual happiness and enthusiasm as he pumps his fist into the air, only to freeze for a few seconds and processes to fall backward and pass out there and then, eliminating himself from the challenge. Confessional, Gwen. The Awake-a-thon was probably the most brutal thing I've ever done in my life. Gwen says. End confessional. Gwen lets out a yawn as she looks at the ground. This is the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. She says as Trent turns to her as he yawns. Could be way worse. Trent says as Gwen raises an eyebrow at him. Oh yeah? How? Gwen asks. I could be stuck here without you to talk to. Trent says while smiling at her. This causes Gwen to smile a little while gaining a bit of a blush on her pale cheeks. Heather narrows her eyes at this. Naruto looks down at his nature-loving teammate and was curious about what she was doing. Hey, Dawn. Naruto calls out to her as Dawn just turns her head at him. Yes, Naruto. Dawn asks. What cha doin'? Naruto asks. Dawn looks at him with mild surprise before she composes herself to answer his question. I'm simply allowing churka or natural energy from nature to enter into my body and enter a state of perfect connection of mind, body, and soul with everything around you. The perfect harmony. Dawn explains. Naruto looks at her as he ponders about this. He felt he had heard this before. Chakra. Isn't that how ancient monks and sages could do back in the early days? Naruto says, causing Dawn to get surprised and look at him. You know for this? Dawn asks as Naruto nods and does a so gesture. Yeah, sort of. My grandfather is soft of a sage himself, I've seen him mediate a bunch of times growing up. When I asked him why he does it, he told him that it's the perfect way to be one with the universe. He's only experienced it a few times in his life and he says that he loved the moments when it happened for him. It takes a lot of patience, time, and willpower for someone to reach that level. Naruto says. Have you been in that state before? He asks and Dawn just sadly shakes her head. No, I have not. I've only been able to hear nature. With how civilization is ever so expanding, nature is taking a toll and I've never been able to truly connect with it. Dawn says, looking a bit sad at not being able to experience what Naruto said. Naruto looks at her and thought of a way to cheer her up. Well, we're here and we're far from any real civilization. So, maybe you can fully real connect with nature. Naruto says as he gets off his seat and sits beside Dawn, legs crossed like hers were. And if you like, I could help out. I may not be a nature person but I've seen my grandfather and how he does it, maybe that could help you out in this goal if you like. He says as he smiles at her. Dawn looks at him as she smiles as well. I'd really enjoy that. Dawn says as the two start talking. While all this was happening, Heather looks at them and narrows her eyes. Confessional, Heather. So my strategy coming into the game is simple. I'm going to get 2 other campers to form an alliance with me and take to the final 3. Heather says, the only question is, who can I find that is desperate or dumb enough to do whatever I say? End confessional. What are you doing? The two turn as they hear Gwen asking, they look and see Lindsay doing a handstand. Trying to get the BLD to rush to my head so I can stay awake. Lindsay says, I think it's working. She says, feeling the BLD rushing down as her legs wiggle a bit. Miraculously, her skirt somehow didn't flop down while she was doing the handstand. A/N, poor choice of words really. Naruto notices something and blushes as he turns his head away. Lindsay, your CHST is, kind of almost coming out from your top. Naruto stutters, gaining the blonde's attention as she was confused. Lindsay utters as she looks down or up for her depending on her orientation and sees that her melons were close to popping out. Oh, you're right. She says as she plants her feet back on the ground and stands up straight before fixing her top to where her melons wouldn't be at risk of popping out. She turns to Naruto and smiles at him. Thanks so much, Nate. You're so sweet. She says, smiling brightly at him as he just smiles and nods. No problem, and my name is Naruto. Naruto says, correcting her on his name. He had a feeling about her that she couldn't get people's names right from the first day and didn't mind her calling him the wrong name, he'd just correct her every time. Can I try that? Beth asks, smiling at Lindsay as looks at her and nods. Sure. Lindsay says. Beth drops down to her hands and lifts her legs up into a shaky handstand as Lindsay was helping her stabilize. While this was happening, Heather looks at them with a certain glint in her eyes. Perfect. Heather utters as she smirks, she had found her 2 Alliance members. Lindsay, Beth. Can I talk to you for a sec? Sure. Lindsay says before helping Beth back onto her feet as they walk to Heather. All the while Naruto and Dawn saw this and raised their eyebrows. She's trying something. Could have been more secretive about it really. Naruto says as he chuckles at how open Heather was making this. Perhaps. Dawn says, looking at Heather for a bit as she snaps out of her thoughts and looks back at Naruto. All we have to do is wait and see what unfolds. She says as Naruto nods. Yeah. Naruto says. He then turns to Dawn and looks at her as he ponders on something. Hey, I've been meaning to ask you, how can you read other people's minds like you've been doing since you got here, you know? He asks. Dawn looks at him and thought about his question. Oh, that's kind of strong to explain really. What I can say is that my family has always been able to read auras or sense chakra for others for generations on my mother's side. Dating back to my elder grandfather really. I come from a long line of aura readers and nature lovers. Most of my family believe that plants, animals, and all other living beings on the planet need to be protected and live with harmony and understanding. The perfect world. Dawn says as a butterfly flies onto her hand and lands on it, as she looks at it. That's really interesting to hear. Naruto says, intrigued by this knowledge, but he blinks when he realizes what Dawn said. Wait, you said most of your family follow what you just said. There've been members who don't? He asks as Dawn sighs and nods. Yes, there have been those in my bloodline who sadly weren't nature lovers or abused their abilities for selfish reasons. Dawn says as she looks down at the ground. What happened to them? The ones who weren't nature lovers. Naruto asks. Dawn sighs again and turns to him as she had an expression he haven't seen from her yet. It was an expression of sorrow. They lose their ability to read auras and sense chakra, permanently Yvette cut from Mother Nature and were cast out of the family name. It's the ultimate shame in my family really. Dawn says, as she lets the butterfly fly away from her hand as she watches on with her expression. Naruto was surprised in hearing this, and saw the look on Dawn's face as he felt she was sad from this and wanted to at least cheer her up. Whoa, that's heavy. Naruto utters after processing the information he listened, and he shakes his head and looks at the petite girl. But it's your ideal beliefs, and I can respect that. Everyone is entitled to believe in what they want. I'm not to judge what you think. He says. Dawn looks at him with mild surprise. She had expected him to say something, but not that. She looked mild surprised for a bit before a small smile. Thank you. Dawn says. So, can you tell me what my aura looks like? Naruto asks, wanting to know what was his aura. Dawn looks at him and focus. Well, yours is something that I've never seen before. It's a mix of various colors, but the main two are orange and yellow. On one side, it's calm, at peace. It tells me that you're energetic, loyal, loving, and a trustworthy person while also creative. While on the other side, Dawn says but stops as she tries to find the right words to describe what she saw, but Naruto had an idea. Wild, unpredictable, kind of chaotic. Naruto asks, with a smile as Dawn just sheepishly nods. Yes. Dawn says sheepishly as she rubs her arm, and Naruto chuckles to himself. Yeah, kind of had a feeling it'd be like that, given my life and all. So, it's not that big of a surprise to me. Naruto says as he and Dawn couldn't help themselves and processed to laugh a little. Over with the others, Eva was listening to her music with her MP3 player as she yawns and felt the need to go to the bathroom. Removing her earphones, she stands up from her seat and stretches while placing her device into her pocket. I'm going to the bathroom. I'll be back. Eva says to Jeff and Bridget, who just nod, and she starts leaving the campfire toward the stalls. While she walked, she didn't notice her MP3 player fall out of her pocket and land on the floor as she walks away. Heather looks and spots the shiny device on the floor and gains a deviant plot. She stands up from her seat and walks over to where the MP3 player lay and looked around to see if no one was watching her. Once she determined that the coast was clear, she made her move. Heather does some stretching motions and sneakily picks up the MP3 player. With it in her hands, she was about to leave. What are you doing? Heather stops and she quickly hid her hands behind her as she turns and sees Naruto standing behind her, looking at her with a glare and had his arms crossed. What are you talking about? I'm just doing a little stretch to help me stay awake. Heather says with a front of innocence, but Naruto wasn't buying it. Nice try. But I saw you picking up something that doesn't belong to you. Naruto says as he taps his foot on the floor. He then holds out his hand. Give it back, now. Again, I don't know what you're talking about. Heather says, forcing out a smile, but again, Naruto wasn't buying it as his glare narrows. Oh really, then why is Eva's MP3 player in the hand you're hiding behind you? Naruto asks. He sees Heather slightly flinch at the question and he knew he had her. If you're saying that you have nothing in your hands, then show me them. To prove that you're innocent. He says with force. Gritting her teeth, Heather knew that she had nothing left to hide, so she moves her hands out from behind and holds them out to him as Naruto sees the MP3 player. A little stretch, huh? Bullshit. Naruto says as he swipes the MP3 player out from Heather's hands and inspects it and saw it wasn't broken or tampered with. He then looks back at Heather with his glare not dropping. Next time you try lying, but more convincing. He says. Oh, you meant that MP3 player. Oh, I was going to give it back to her. Heather says, now looking surprised, while the blonde wasn't impressed. Right. Naruto says. Just stay with your team, and I'll stay with mine. Got it? He says, with a hint of force in his tone. One that Heather didn't like at all as she narrows her eyes at him. Yes. Heather says as she grits her teeth even more. The blonde gives her a nod and he turns to go back to his spot with Dawn while Heather glares at his back before she turns around and heads back to her seat. Naruto sees Eva returning from the bathroom. Hey, Eva. You dropped this. Naruto says as he holds out her MP3 player. Eva looks at him and sees it, her eyes widen as she checks her pockets and saw that it wasn't there and in his hand, she rushes over to him and takes it. Where'd you find it? Eva asks, looking at it. Someone was about to take it for themselves but I saw it and went to get it back. I get that it's important to you. Naruto says, smiling since he knew what it is like to lose something important to them. Eva looks at him for a bit as Naruto saw this and got nervous about what she'd do to him and she does something that no one expected. She effortlessly picks him up from the floor and gives him a big hug. Thank you so much. Eva thanks him, tightly hugging him as her strength was too much for Naruto, as he could feel his back crack from the pressure. And no problem. Naruto manages to breathe out before she sets him down as he coughs out. Eva gives him a nod and smiles a little before she heads back to her spot. Naruto nods back before he cracks his back into place and he sits back down. Time skip, 12 hours later. As the Awake-a-thon continued, bit by bit campers were beginning to fall asleep. From the Gophers, it was Izzy, Noah, Lashana, and Tyler who had fallen asleep with everyone else looking exhausted and were on the verge of falling asleep any minute now. All except Justin who had his eyes open and was standing firmly in his spot all this time. On the base side, Bridget, Katie, and Sadie were the ones who were out. And surprisingly, most of the base were still fighting to stay awake while Courtney, while tired, kept running in place. Congratulations campers, you made it to the 24-hour mark. Chris says, looking at the completely exhausted and sleep-deprived campers from his spot at the metal barrel. It's time to take things up a notch. He says, smirking as Chef arrives, wearing a pink sheep costume while holding a golden harp. He then moves towards something that was covered with a sheet. With fairy tales. He yells as he removes the sheet and reveals a large pile of various books. Oh, he's not serious. Gwen utters, this was one of the last things she needed right now. Chris smirks. Oh, I am. Chris says, grabbing one of the books and opening it, but before he starts reading, he turns to Eva who was still listening to her music. Now, no earphones will be used from now on. So, I suggest you hand your MP3 player over to Chef Eva. He says. Eva growls as she takes off her earphones and wraps them around the player as Chef walks up to her and holds his hand out. You better give that back to me, or else we'll have a problem, and you won't want that. Eva hisses as she reluctantly hands over her player and Chef walks back to Chris who clears his throat as Chef starts playing the harp with Chris silently snickering, much to Chef's dismay. Once, upon a time, there was, inside this boring kingdom, a boring village. Chris begins to read, and his reading was working as Beth lets out a long yawn and her eyes begin to close slightly while Jeff's were as well, only for him to snap them open. And inside this, boring, sleep village, was filled with, very, boring children, who did very, boring things. Chris reads on as Cody falls asleep on something very soft and warm as he dreams of a bunch of sheep jumping over a harp, as the one Chef had. However, Cody was awakened by a loud fart and he smelt something awful. Cody opens his eyes and looks around at what could have been the cause of the smell, only to be horrified when he saw that the warm, soft thing he slept on was actually Owen's butt, and he got a direct spot of his fart while Owen was still out. Cody turns his head and coughs out the fart from his mouth. As time went on, more of the campers fell asleep as the ones who were still awake were struggling to stay that way as Chris and Chef were doing various things to make them fall asleep. At one point, Chef dressed as a ballerina and starts dancing around the campfire while Chris plays Dance of the Sugar Plum on a radio he had with him. The remaining campers were shocked at this as the sparkles coming off from Chef hit them, causing them to somehow yawn and get sleepier and more exhausted than before. Chef continues to dance with surprising grace and elegance as DJ thought of a plan to help him stay awake. He tied himself to a tree and thought by having his body tied, it'd force him to stay awake. Unfortunately, he gets hit by the sparkles which causes him to yawn and fall asleep and lumps forward, which causes the tree to fall on top of him, and get eliminated, leaving the base with just 7 left. Tim, Br. Gwen says, seeing DJ's fail. Time skip, 16 hours later. Time into the Awake-a-thon, 40 hours. Time rolls on to the next day and to the next evening as the challenge now reached its 40-hour mark, and needless to say, the campers were at their wits' end. Confessional, Courtney. I figured that if I kept moving, I'd outlast all of them. Courtney explains the game strategy she had at the time, I just had to keep my eye on the ball. End confessional. Courtney was still running in place, but from all the running and how tired she was, she looked like she was ready to drop at any given moment now as she, Duncan, Eva, Dawn, and Naruto were the last ones from the base to be awake. On the Gophers, things were relatively the same as it was only Gwen, Trent, Lindsay, Beth, Heather and Justin were the ones awake with the handsome teen still somehow standing on his feet. Heather turns to Lindsay. We need to talk about our strategy. Heather says to the blonde, but Lindsay doesn't respond to her as she was looking at something, causing Heather to tap onto her arm, causing Lindsay to snap to her thought. Huh? What? Lindsay mutters, clearly exhausted as evident from how she looked and sounded. Didn't you hear what I said? Heather asks while Lindsay still didn't look at her as she nods slowly. Oh, yeah, yellow and red. Lindsay says, making Heather look at her with a confused expression. What? Heather utters, clearly confused. What are you looking at? She asks, seeing Lindsay was focusing on something else. She follows Lindsay's line of sight and turns to what Lindsay was looking at and sees Naruto and Dawn, talking and laughing about something. Upon seeing this, Heather got an idea of what or who she was looking at and looked back at the blonde with a glare. Are you staring at that bstrd? She asks, glaring at the blonde bombshell who shakes her head. No, I'm not having the steak, I'll have the dessert please. Lindsay mutters as she couldn't stay awake any longer and processes to pass out. Beth followed her shortly after, causing Heather to mentally scream at this, seeing that she was alone in her alliance. Over at the base side, Naruto and Dawn were talking to one another, about what were their interests and getting to know one another. Okay, favorite color, movie, and food? Go. Naruto says with Dawn taking a moment to think about it. My favorite color is green, my favorite movie is The Draft, A/N. There is no actuate info on what this portrays of the movie, and my favorite food is all natural soy burgers and tofu fries. Dawn says as. Alright, my favorite color is orange. My favorite movie is action movies really. Anything fast-paced and has a great story to it is my liking. Favorite food, pork ramen, pizza, burgers, and sweets. Naruto says, favorite song. He asks and Dawn frowns as she thinks. I don't usually listen to that much music, but I do love What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. Ah, that's a classic. My favorite? Man, that's a tough one since I love all types of music but mainly rock and all the types of rock. If I had to really choose, it'd have to be Naruto was saying but gets cut off. Paradise City by Guns N' Roses. Dawn says, cutting Naruto off as he looks at her with wide eyes. Why yeah. How'd you Naruto was asking but stopped as he sees Dawn smirking a little and knew what she did. You read my aura. He says and Dawn nods. Sorry, but when you started to speak about music, rock to be exact, your aura color changed from orange to yellow, meaning that you were getting happy thinking about your past, and I saw Guns N' Roses and the flash images of Los Angeles and a Garden of Paradise and quickly made the song out. Dawn explains with Naruto looking at her with a surprised look. Wow, that's very impressive. Naruto says as he nods. But yeah, that's my all-time favorite song. It is because it's the first song I heard at a concert when I was 8 years old. He says as he looks at the sky. I see. The song really impacted your life. Dawn asks with Naruto nodding. It did, and I have to thank them for that. Naruto says. Dawn raises an eyebrow. Who? Dawn asks. The two people who showed me that very concert on that hill. They changed my life forever. If I hadn't met them, who knows where I would be. Naruto says, thinking about that girl he met during a summer in his youth. She plagued his mind for years now and he still doesn't remember what she looked like. Dawn looks at him and saw his. I see. Dawn says as she looks at him. If you want to talk about them or anything else, you can come to me and I'll listen. She says with a smile. I'll take you up on that, Dawn. Naruto says. He looks down and sees something that was really strange. He sees Owen walking by Gwen and Trent, naked but still sleeping. Why is he walking into the woods naked? He asks. His question causes Dawn to look at what he was seeing and saw Owen disappear into the woods. I have no clue, and I'd rather not know. Dawn says, disgusted at what she saw and wanting it out of her mind. Yeah. Naruto agrees. Confessional, Owen. Did I ever mention that I ate the entire baked beans and maple syrup? Owen sheepishly asks, laughing a little as he looks at the camera. Yeah, funny thing about me, is that if I eat baked beans, they make me sleepwalk, and sometimes when that happens, I tend to strip NDE and sleepwalk around. End confessional. Wow, look at that, a shooting star. Naruto says. He and Dawn was laying on the ground next to one another and were staring at the night stars as a shooting star briefly passes by. It still amazes me how appealing nature totally is. Dawn says. Yeah. Naruto says, looking at the stars still. Some time passes by and a thought comes into his mind. Hey, can I ask you a question? He asks. You already have asked one, but you may. Dawn giggles a bit. I know that this seems a bit too personal, but do you have a boyfriend? Naruto asks. Dawn's eyes widen a bit as she blushes at the question, but that blush quickly fades away as her expression changes. Actually, I've never had a boyfriend before. In fact, I don't have that many friends back home. Dawn reveals as she rubs her arm. Most people in my school really don't talk to me or even approach me since they think I'm weird and creepy and am obsessive in regards to nature. So they just ignore or bully me to the point where I'm an outcast at school, she says while averting her eyes from him and feeling sad by the memories of school. A/N, it hurt me writing this. Naruto frowns at hearing this and seeing Dawn turns away. Sure, Dawn was a strange mysterious girl, but he thought it was really cool. it gave her this charm that he'd never seen from a girl before, and it made her really cool and awesome to be around, as the unexpected happens to her always, that was his opinion. He turns to her and places his hand on her shoulder. Well, it's their loss, he says as Dawn turns to him with wide eyes as he looks at her. You're a really cool person, Dawn, probably one of the coolest I've met in my life. And if anyone with a brain cell thinks otherwise, well, they can screw off since they lost their chance in getting to know who you are and seeing how cool you are, he says, closing his eyes as he smiles at her. Dawn looks at him with a surprised look as she felt her cheek gaining a shade of red and was a little warmed by his words. She moves her body ever close to his and leans her head onto his shoulder. This takes Naruto by surprise as he didn't expect this from Dawn, but he didn't mind, so he let her lean onto him as they enjoy the sounds of nature and the crackling of the fire as they both could feel their cheeks start to get hot a little. Time skip, a few more hours later. Time into the Awake-a-thon, 51 hours and 8 seconds. Look at him, he's like a statue. The two blondes turned as their attention was drawn by Gwen as they see her and Trent standing near Justin, looking at him with amazement as he was standing firmly and his eyes unblinking. He hasn't moved in over 50 hours. Gwen says as she looks at Justin. Hello. Yo. Yip. Yip. Yip, 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 yip. Both Gwen and Trent start yelling and making noises and commotions in trying to break Justin's concentration, but nothing worked. Amazing. Look at the concentration from this guy, Gwen says, visibly impressed by her teammate. That's really impressive. That's got to take a lot to pull off for this long. Naruto says as he yawns. Dawn looks at him with confusion. But, he's not concentrating. He just has his eyelids painted and he's been sleeping all this time. Dawn lets out a yawn. What? Naruto gasps, as he sits up and looks at Justin with wide eyes as Dawn looks at everyone with confusion. What? I thought you all knew. Dawn says, leaning her head onto Naruto's lap. Duncan walks up to the handsome teen and wipes his finger against Justin's eye, causing Justin to wake up with a jolt. He opens his eyes to that he really was sleeping while the paint on Duncan's fingers was just makeup. She's right. The dude really was sleeping. Duncan yells, causing Justin to flinch. Chris. Yo, Justin's got his eyelids painted. He yells, causing the host to look at him. What? No way, I've got to see this. Chris says as he rushes over to Justin. Upon taking a closer look at Justin's eyes while Justin himself nervously smiles and blinks, showing off his painted eyelids. That's so crazy incredible, but you're still no dude. He says as Justin slumps at defeat with the Gophers now having Gwen, Heather, and Trent left for the Gophers. Well, looks like that takes care of that. Dawn. Naruto says, but he gets no response from Dawn, confusing him. Dawn. He calls to her as he looks down to his lap and saw Dawn fast asleep, using his legs as a pillow. Seeing this, Naruto smiles a little and shakes his head. Oh. Haha. He takes off his hoodie before taking out his can of Azul Toro and lies the item of clothing over Dawn, as a makeshift blanket. Get some rest. I promise we'll win. He whispers to her before he looks back up at the stars. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Pixel's fanbook on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.